I had no interest in cinema at all. I had no interest in cinema. As a youngster, I didn't watch movies. It was simply that when I was 17 years old and had left school, I was looking for a job, and there was a job advertised in a local newspaper for an assistant for a film production company, believe it or not, in Glasgow. They said lad required for a film company. So it looked more interesting than some of the other jobs on offer, so I took that and I got that job after quite a few interviews, because obviously quite a few people were after it. And it was only having got that job, and it was a small documentary company. It was one man and a boy, and I was the boy, as it were. It was only after having joined the film business that I started to think about films seriously, started to watch them and become interested in them over the course of a few years. And by the time I was in my early 20s, I was quite dedicated to being a filmmaker. Well, it was the mid-60s. I joined the film business in 1964, and mid-60s to the early 70s it was all the French, the new wave. It was Godard mainly for me, Alain Resnais a bit. I didn't take to Bergman very much. He was a bit too theatrical for me, because as I say, I didn't have any background in theatre or whatever, drama. So it was really the kind of the French new wave that got me. Godard is still a hero. I don't know why I know he's a cranky old man now, but he still did some things then that inspired me. I mean, we were interested in film as a thing. It was a substance. It was a material that was my take on film. I wasn't making films to entertain people or to tell stories. It was actually it was almost like sculpting with film. You know? That's and I made a few kind of experimental films before I made the first drama film as well. I made a film that, funnily enough, at the Edinburgh Film Festival. I think it was '71. I emptied a cinema with my first film. It's called Waterloo, and it was a very arduous film. It was quite a tough film. It had long takes in it and slow movement. Virtually, I think there was about 400 people in the cinema when the film started, and there was about 10 at the end of it.
Wow, that's quite a record.
So that's when I said to myself, maybe I better start making entertainment films. So that's when I started to get interested in writing scripts and telling stories.
Yeah.
I couldn't, for anything in the world, I couldn't, get out of bed in the morning to go and make, Robocop 3 or whatever. I just wouldn't know how to do it, and I wouldn't know why I was doing it, and there would be so it would just be an impossible undertaking. So there's no point in spending any more time, kind of worrying about why or not. These things it's just not part of me as a filmmaker. In a funny way, I don't think that I'm a filmmaker. I'm just someone who has put certain ideas on film, but it's kind of incidental that they've ended up on film. They could have come out in some other way. They could have come out in the form of writing or something visual or whatever. But that's it, really. I'm not a dedicated filmmaker, in the commercial sense, definitely not. I had made one film before that which gave me the opportunity to make Gregory's Girl, although I'd written the script for Gregory's Girl first but couldn't finance it, so I had to make the other one first. But I was beginning to sense, because the first film had attracted the producer to Gregory's Girl, a couple of people I didn't know before that, and also because the other film had done well at a few festivals, including Edinburgh and London, so I'm quite grateful to film festivals in general. It gave me the opportunity to find the money to make Gregory's Girl, so it was the first film that I made that actually had money behind it, and so once you've got that, if someone spent some money, they want to make sure they get their money back, so then you have a sense of, somebody's going to promote it, someone's going to want to sell it, and then the whole thing kicks in, the whole machine kicks in. While I was making Gregory's Girl, I was already talking to David Putnam about Local Hero. Okay. And he approached me and said he by that time had made Chariots of Fire, and Putnam had made Chariots of Fire then, so he had quite a really good profile as a producer, and he could. We made Local Hero for not an awful lot of money, so it was quite a modest budget, so it was easy to find that money. Preview, and we went through the whole preview thing in America, where show the film to audiences, and they do numbers. They say, you know, they fill in cards and all that stuff. And the film didn't do all that well in that. None of my films ever do well in previews, but the financiers at that time, Warner Brothers, they were very benign, but they said, look, we would rather you change the ending. We want you to have a happier ending, and they said we'll pay for it. You know, they wanted to change the story so that the American character, the young American, although he gets into his helicopter to go home at the end, they wanted to change it so that and reshoot it, so that he stayed there. He jumps out of the chopper and he goes and says, I'm not leaving my new pals and all this, to kind of sentimentalise it a bit. And I was desperate to avoid having to do that, although it was as I say, it wasn't. They weren't forcing that option on us. They said we can do that if you want. So it was then that I thought up the idea of just ending on the telephone box, which is not quite as sweet as their ending. It's a wee bit too sweet for my liking, but it was just a way of taking the sting out of the harsh ending, you know. So I was quite happy with that compromise. And as it turned out, that phone box, there are people still visiting that phone box in Penn, in the little village where we shot it. And apparently there are people who visit where we made the movie, and then they take the number, and so they go home and they do what the American did, they ring the phone box when they're feeling stressed and things.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, people in Japan and Germany and wherever.
Really?
Yeah. The landlord in the hotel there was telling me that, because we were there quite recently.
Yeah.
I'm just the wrong animal for commercial cinema, I suppose, because I always like options to be open, you know, either for characters or for situations. Whereas in Hollywood's eyes, or in most, you know, mainstream filmmakers' eyes, there is a point A from which you travel to get to point B, and point A and point B are very different. Point B is maybe sweeter and more resolved, or if it's not, even if it's resolved in a negative way, there's still been some change. And my eternal philosophy is that nothing changes, as we all just go through the same mess as individuals, as you know, as characters from beginning to end. And there are people who have lived all the stresses and strains of my life, you know, 300 years ago, and I'm going through the whole mess again. And basically, the human race doesn't ever learn to improve itself. So that's where kind of mainstream cinema and I kind of part company, because they're intent on resolution and I'm intent on the open-ended, and that's just it. Being a filmmaker now has almost turned into a performance art. You've got to, there's this pressure on young filmmakers to deliver themselves as a kind of packaged quantity. This is what I do, I make this kind of film, and here's what I'm bringing to it. And I suppose people like Tarantino or that, who have this packaged image, they've helped create that. And it also just must be the sheer force of numbers, because so many people want into, you know, the music, the film business, whatever, so you have to create an identity. And I know that's necessary, but behind that I would just say, you know, find out what your own predilections are and what makes you feel good about what you're doing, rather than just what you think people want from you out there, you know. And just a measure of authenticity, but maybe people find that anyway, I don't know. I don't think you can't actually make your way through the film business without having a little sense of your own worth. You know, you can't really do it in any other way, because you're putting so much on the line every time, so you really have to know yourself to quite a degree. So that's all I would say, is just learn to know yourself and know what you want, you know, and know what you're good at and what you're bad at, and don't be afraid of what you're bad at. Just do what you're good at, you know. Just horses for courses, as ever.